The train's whistle screamed through the Arizona desert as Sarah Olivia pressed her trembling hand against the window glass, watching the dusty town of Oatman emerge from the heat-shimmered horizon like a mirage that refused to disappear. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and hollow-eyed, and she knew what the people waiting on that platform would see: a fallen woman, a disgrace, someone who deserved their contempt and their whispered condemnations. The telegram she had sent to her aunt 3 weeks ago had been brief and carefully worded, but no amount of delicate phrasing could disguise the truth. She was 22 years old, unmarried, and carrying a child that would be born in 5 months' time. The father, a Philadelphia banker's son who had promised her the world in moonlit gardens, had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby, and her own family had given her 2 choices: go west to her mother's sister in Arizona territory, or find herself on the streets without a penny to her name. The train lurched to a stop, metal screeching against metal, and Sarah gathered her few belongings with hands that would not stop shaking. Through the window, she could see a small crowd gathered on the platform, their faces blurred by the dust and distance, and her stomach twisted with such force that she had to close her eyes and breathe deeply to keep from being sick. This was it. This was the moment when her new life would begin, if you could call it that: a life of shame and sideways glances, of being the cautionary tale that mothers would tell their daughters. She stood on unsteady legs, her traveling dress already coated with the fine red dust that seemed to permeate everything in this God-forsaken territory, and made her way toward the exit. The heat struck her like a physical blow when she stepped onto the platform, so different from the humid summers of Pennsylvania that she actually gasped. The sun was a merciless white disk in a sky so blue it hurt to look at, and the air tasted of copper and sage. Sarah clutched her small carpet bag and looked around desperately for her Aunt Margaret, but the crowd on the platform was dispersing quickly, people heading toward wagons and horses, and she saw no one who looked like they might be waiting for a disgraced niece from the East. "Miss Olivia." The voice came from behind her, low and gentle, with the particular drawl of someone who had spent their entire life under the western sun. Sarah turned, and her breath caught in her throat. The man standing before her was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore dusty work-clothes denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, worn leather boots, and a hat that he removed as he approached her, revealing kind gray eyes that held no judgment, only a gentle concern that made Sarah's prepared defenses crumble before she could even raise them. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong hands that held his hat carefully, and a smile that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Sarah's heart do an unexpected flutter in her chest. "I am Sarah Olivia," she said quietly, lifting her chin in an automatic gesture of dignity that her mother had drilled into her since childhood. "I am looking for my aunt, Margaret Hutchins." The man's smile faded, replaced by an expression of deep sympathy that made Sarah's chest tighten with sudden fear. He stepped closer, mindful of propriety but clearly wanting to soften whatever blow he was about to deliver. "Miss Olivia, my name is Quinn Oliver. I am the foreman at the Double H Ranch where your aunt worked as the cook. I am very sorry to have to tell you this, but Mrs. Hutchins passed away 2 weeks ago. Her heart just gave out one evening while she was preparing supper. It was peaceful, if that is any comfort. We buried her in the town cemetery with a proper service." The platform seemed to tilt beneath Sarah's feet, and she swayed. Quinn's hand shot out to steady her elbow, his touch firm but gentle, and she found herself leaning into that support without meaning to. Aunt Margaret was dead. The one person in the world who had been willing to take her in. The single thread of hope she had been clinging to through 3,000 miles of rattling train journey was gone. Sarah had never even met her mother's youngest sister, only knew her through a handful of letters over the years, but she had been counting on that blood connection to provide sanctuary. Now there was nothing, no one, nowhere to go. "I am sorry," Quinn said again, his voice rough with genuine emotion. "I know this must be a terrible shock. Your telegram arrived after she passed, and I have been checking every train since then, hoping to meet you and explain in person. I did not want you to arrive and find no one waiting." Sarah forced herself to stand upright, pulling away from his supporting hand, even though everything in her wanted to simply collapse and weep. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Oliver. I appreciate you taking the time to inform me. I will make arrangements to return east on the next available train." The lie came automatically, smooth and practiced, even though she had no money for a return ticket and no home to return to even if she did. "Begging your pardon, Miss Olivia, but that would not be until Thursday, and today is Monday." Quinn's gray eyes searched her face with an intensity that made Sarah want to look away, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "You have funds for lodging until then." "The hotel here in Oatman is decent enough, though not fancy." "I will manage," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you again for your trouble, Mr. Oliver." "It is no trouble at all." Quinn turned his hat in his hands, clearly struggling with some internal debate. When he spoke again, his words came out in a rush, as though he feared he would lose his courage if he hesitated. "Miss Olivia, I know this is highly irregular, and I do not want to presume or cause you any discomfort, but I feel I should tell you that your aunt spoke of you often. She told me about your situation, not in gossip but in genuine concern for your welfare. She was worried about you and wanted very much to help you start fresh out here." Sarah felt her face burn with humiliation. Of course her aunt had told people. Of course this kind-eyed cowboy knew exactly what she was and why she had come. She waited for his expression to change, for the warmth in his eyes to cool into disdain, or worse, the sort of leering interest that some men showed toward women they considered fallen and therefore available. But Quinn's face showed only compassion and a deep gentleness that made Sarah's throat ache with unshed tears. "The thing is," Quinn continued, his voice soft, "your aunt's position at the ranch has not been filled yet. The owner, Mr. Hendricks, has been waiting to find the right person. The Double H is about 10 miles outside town, and we employ 15 men who need regular meals. It is hard work, but the pay is fair, and there is a small cabin that goes with the position your aunt lived there. It has 2 rooms and a decent stove. If you wanted the job, I could speak to Mr. Hendricks on your behalf. He is a good man, fair and respectful, and the Hands are decent fellows who would treat you with courtesy." Hope flared in Sarah's chest, so sudden and intense that it was almost painful. A job, a place to live. A way to survive until the baby came and perhaps even after, if she could manage the work with an infant to care for. But reality crushed that hope almost as quickly as it had formed. "Mr. Oliver, I appreciate your kindness more than I can express, but surely you must know that my condition would make such an arrangement impossible. Once people discover that I am carrying a child without a husband, I would bring shame to your employer and create an uncomfortable situation for everyone." Quinn was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those thoughtful gray eyes. Around them, the platform had emptied completely, and the station master had disappeared into his office. The only sounds were the wind rustling through the creosote bushes and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. "Miss Olivia, may I speak plainly?" "I would prefer it," Sarah said, too exhausted for polite evasions. This is Arizona territory, not Philadelphia. Things are different out here. We do not have the luxury of being overly concerned with Eastern social niceties. A good cook who shows up on time and does honest work is valued, regardless of her personal circumstances. Your aunt told me that you have no husband and that you are expecting a child. She also told me that you were treated poorly by people who should have stood by you. I cannot speak for everyone in Oatman, but I can tell you that Mr. Hendricks cares about a person's character and work ethic, not their past mistakes or misfortunes. And the men at the Double H follow his lead. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Quinn replaced his hat, tilting it back slightly so she could still see his face clearly. His smile was small and sad. "My mother found herself in a similar situation 27 years ago. She was a maid in a wealthy household in Texas, and the son of the family forced himself on her. When she became pregnant with me, she was thrown out without references or wages owed. She made her way to Arizona and found work at a ranch where the owner did not care about scandal, only about whether she could cook and clean. That man gave us both a chance at a decent life. My mother passed 5 years ago, but I have never forgotten what it meant to have someone show us kindness when the rest of the world was ready to condemn us. If I can do the same for someone else, then I figure that is the least I can do to honor her memory." Sarah felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. She had not cried once since discovering she was pregnant, had maintained an icy control through her family's fury, and the awful realization that the man she loved had never loved her at all. But this stranger's simple kindness shattered every defense she had built. "I do not want charity," she managed to say through her tears. "I will work hard. I will earn my place." "I have no doubt about that," Quinn said gently. He produced a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "Come on, Miss Olivia. Let me take you out to the ranch and introduce you to Mr. Hendricks. If the two of you cannot come to an arrangement, I will personally pay for your room at the hotel until Thursday and make sure you get safely on the train. You have my word on that." Sarah took the handkerchief and dried her eyes, struggling to regain some measure of composure. "You must think me very foolish. I think you have been through hell and are still standing," Quinn said. "That takes strength, not foolishness. Now, do you have more luggage, or is that carpet bag everything?" "This is everything," Sarah admitted, feeling ashamed of how little she possessed. Her family had allowed her to pack only one bag, and most of that was taken up with practical items rather than the pretty dresses and books she had left behind. "Then, let us get you out of this heat," Quinn said. He offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy, and after a moment's hesitation, Sarah took it. His arm was solid and warm beneath her hand, and she could feel the strength in the lean muscles. He led her to a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses, both of them flicking their ears against the flies. Quinn helped her up onto the bench seat with careful attention to her dignity, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Oatman and onto the desert road, Sarah found herself watching Quinn from the corner of her eye. He drove with easy competence, his hands light on the reins, his attention on the rutted track ahead. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape, turning the red rocks and golden hills into something almost beautiful. It was so different from everything Sarah had ever known, vast and empty and harsh, but also strangely honest. There were no drawing rooms here where people smiled to your face and condemned you behind your back. No elaborate social rules designed to make you feel small. Just open sky and hard earth and people like Quinn Oliver, who offered kindness to strangers without expecting anything in return. "Tell me about the ranch," Sarah said, needing to break the silence. "You said there are 15 men," Quinn nodded, seeming pleased by her interest. 15 hands plus Mr. Hendricks and his son, Daniel, who is 12. Mrs. Hendricks died in childbirth along with what would have been their second child, about 8 years ago. Mr. Hendricks runs a good operation, cattle mostly, but also horses. We have about 2,000 head of cattle ranging over some 20,000 acres of grazing land. It is hard work, especially during roundup and branding season, but the men are paid fair wages and treated with respect. Your aunt cooked 3 meals a day for everyone during busy seasons, 2 during slower times when some of the men are out on the range for days at a time. That is a lot of cooking, Sarah said, feeling daunted. She could prepare basic meals, but cooking for nearly 20 men every day was far beyond her experience. Your aunt managed it well, Quinn said. She had a good system. And during busy times, some of the men pitch in with washing dishes and such. Nobody expects fancy food just hot, filling meals that stick to your ribs. Beans, beef, bread, stew, that sort of thing. Can you make bread? Yes, Sarah said, grateful that at least this was something she knew. My grandmother taught me when I was young. I can make decent biscuits and bread, though I have never made such large quantities. That is a start, Quinn said encouragingly. Your aunt kept detailed notes about quantities and timing. I am sure her papers are still in the cabin. And like I said, the men are helpful when needed. Most of us grew up doing for ourselves, so we understand the work involved. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels crunching over stones and packed earth. Sarah watched the landscape roll past, so alien and yet somehow appealing. There was something cleansing about the emptiness, as though the desert wind could blow away all the painful memories and give her space to breathe again. For the first time in months, she felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. "May I ask you something?" Quinn said eventually, his tone careful. "Of course." "When is the baby due?" Sarah felt herself flush, but Quinn's tone had been matter-of-fact rather than judgmental. "Late September," the doctor thought. "I am just past 4 months now." Quinn nodded, calculating. "That will be right at the end of roundup season. Things slow down considerably in October as the weather starts to cool. If you are still at the ranch then, the lighter workload should help you manage. If you are still at the ranch then." The words implied that Quinn expected her to stay, that he believed this arrangement might actually work. Sarah wanted desperately to believe him, but fear and experience had taught her to protect herself. "Mr. Oliver, I need to ask you something as well, and I need you to answer me honestly." "All right. The men at the ranch, will they be a danger to me? I know how I must appear, a woman alone without a husband, already proven to be fallen. I cannot put myself in a situation where I would be vulnerable to unwanted advances." Her voice shook slightly on the last words, and she hated herself for that weakness. Quinn's jaw tightened and his hands flexed on the reins. When he spoke, his voice was hard in a way it had not been before. "Miss Olivia, I will be straight with you. Most of the men at the Double H are good fellows who would cut off their own hands before disrespecting a woman. But I would be lying if I said every man in the territory was honorable. What I can promise you is this: any man who bothers you in any way will answer to me personally, and then to Mr. Hendricks. We have a zero-tolerance policy for that sort of behavior. 2 years ago, a hand named Garrett made inappropriate comments to a woman in town. Mr. Hendricks fired him on the spot and made it known throughout the territory that Garrett was not welcome at any respectable ranch. The man had to leave Arizona entirely to find work. He paused, then continued more gently. "Your cabin has a strong door with a good lock. You would have complete privacy there. The main house where meals are served is separate, and you would never be alone with the men. I or Mr. Hendricks are always present during meals. And I give you my word that I will keep watch. Your aunt was like family to all of us, and helping her niece is the least we can do to honor her memory." Sarah found herself believing him. There was something solid and trustworthy about Quinn Oliver, a fundamental decency that she recognized instinctively. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I am sorry to have to ask such things, but I have learned to be cautious." "You have nothing to apologize for," Quinn said firmly. "Asking those questions shows good sense, not mistrust. Any woman in your position should demand assurances of safety, and any decent man would want to provide them." The sun was lower on the horizon when they turned off the main road onto a track, marked by a weathered wooden arch with the letters HH burned into the crosspiece. The Double H Ranch spread across a broad valley, dotted with cattle and bordered by red rock formations that glowed like embers in the slanting light. The main house was a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and what looked like at least 6 rooms. Nearby stood a barn, several corrals, a bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Everything looked well-maintained and prosperous in a modest, working sort of way. Quinn drove past the main house toward a small cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings. It was simple but solid, built of adobe with a wooden door painted blue and 2 small windows with real glass. A small covered porch provided shade, and someone had planted roses along one side of the cabin, though they looked thirsty and neglected. "This was your aunt's place," Quinn said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "Like I said, it has 2 rooms, a main room with the kitchen area and a smaller bedroom. There is a pump right outside for water, and the outhouse is behind those cottonwood trees, shared with the main house. On Saturday evenings, the men heat water for bathing in the bunkhouse, and your aunt always had Wednesdays for her own bath in her cabin. Mr. Hendricks is very particular about cleanliness." He helped Sarah down from the wagon, and she stood looking at the little cabin with its peeling blue door and dusty windows. It was not much, but it was infinitely more than she had expected to have. Quinn produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the door, pushing it open and standing back to let Sarah enter first. The interior was dim and stuffy after being closed up for 2 weeks, but Sarah could see it had been a comfortable space. The main room held a large cast iron stove, a sturdy work table, shelves lined with dishes and cooking implements, and a small sitting area with 2 chairs and a table near one window. The bedroom, visible through an open doorway, contained a bed with an iron frame, a dresser, a washstand, and a trunk. Everything was coated with a fine layer of dust, but Sarah could see that her aunt had kept a tidy, organized home. "I will open the windows and help you air it out," Quinn said, already moving to suit action to words. "The linens should be washed before you use them, but I can ask Maria, she is Mr. Hendricks' housekeeper, to help with that, or I can do it myself if you prefer. I am not above doing laundry." Despite everything, Sarah found herself wanting to smile at the image of this tall cowboy doing washing. "I can manage the laundry," she said. "I appreciate the offer, though." Quinn nodded and continued opening windows. Fresh air began to flow through the cabin, carrying the scent of sage and horses and dust. "Let me go find Mr. Hendricks and bring him here to meet you. I will be back in just a few minutes. Will you be all right on your own?" "Yes," Sarah said, setting her carpetbag on the table. "Thank you, Mr. Oliver, for everything." Quinn paused in the doorway, his hat in his hands again. "Please call me Quinn. Mr. Oliver makes me feel like my father, and he was a man I have no desire to emulate." "Quinn," Sarah said, testing the name. "Then you must call me Sarah." His smile was like sunrise. "Sarah, it is. I will be right back." After he left, Sarah stood alone in the cabin and let herself truly feel the weight of the day. Aunt Margaret was dead. Sarah was alone and pregnant in a territory she had never seen before, about to throw herself on the mercy of strangers and hope that their kindness would extend to her situation. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. Here, in this dusty little cabin in the middle of the Arizona desert, she could start over. She could be someone other than the foolish girl who had believed a handsome man's lies and paid dearly for that trust. She walked through the cabin, opening cabinet doors and drawers, beginning to inventory what was available. Her aunt had been an organized woman. Everything was labeled and stored logically. And Sarah found the notebook Quinn had mentioned, filled with recipes and notes about quantities needed for feeding large groups. The handwriting was neat and precise, and Sarah found herself wishing desperately that she had known this aunt who had been willing to help her, who had clearly been a competent and capable woman making her own way in this harsh land. Footsteps on the porch announced Quinn's return. Sarah turned to see him accompanied by a man in his early 40s, tall and rangy with dark hair going silver at the temples, and a weathered face that spoke of decades in the sun. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing kind brown eyes that assessed Sarah with a frank but not unkind gaze. "Miss Olivia, this is Mr. James Hendricks, owner of the Double H," Quinn said. "Mr. Hendricks, this is Sarah Olivia, Mrs. Hutchins' niece from Philadelphia." "Miss Olivia," Mr. Hendricks said, his voice a deep bass, "please accept my condolences on your aunt's passing. She was a fine woman and a good friend to this ranch. We all miss her greatly." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said, clasping her hands together to keep them from trembling. "Quinn has explained the situation to me, both about my aunt's death and about the possibility of me taking her position here. He also told you about my circumstances." Mr. Hendricks' expression did not change. "He did. I appreciate your directness in addressing it. Quinn tells me you can cook and are willing to work hard. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. I am not experienced in cooking for large groups, but I am a fast learner and I will do whatever is necessary to earn my place here. I can also clean, do laundry, mend clothes, and keep accounts if needed. I had a good education before I left Philadelphia." "Can you start tomorrow morning?" Mr. Hendricks asked. "The men have been making do with their own cooking for 2 weeks now, and I think we are all desperate for a proper meal." Sarah felt dizzy with relief. "Yes, sir, I can start tomorrow. What time would you like breakfast served?" 5:30, Mr. Hendricks said. "The men start work at dawn, so they need to eat beforehand. Lunch is at noon and supper at 6. During Roundup, which starts in 3 weeks, we will need an earlier breakfast and a larger lunch brought out to the range. But we will work out those details as we go. Your wages will be $30 a month plus room and board. That was what I paid your aunt, and it seemed fair to both of us. You will have Sundays off except for preparing a cold lunch, and one afternoon a week free for personal time. Does that sound acceptable? $30 a month." It was not a fortune, but it was more than Sarah had dared to hope for. With no rent to pay and food provided, she could save almost all of it for when the baby came. "That sounds more than acceptable, Mr. Hendricks. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." "Do not thank me yet," Mr. Hendricks said, but his eyes were kind. "Wait until you have spent a few weeks feeding 15 hungry cowboys 3 times a day. You may decide I am a slave driver. Now, do you need anything immediately? Food, supplies, help cleaning this place?" "I could use some basic supplies for tonight," Sarah admitted. "Just bread and cheese or something simple, and I should probably wash the linens before I sleep here." "I will have Maria bring you some supper and help with the linens," Mr. Hendricks said. She lives in the main house with Daniel and me and manages the household there. She is a good woman, and I think you will like her. Quinn, why do not you stay and help Miss Olivia get settled? Make sure the stove is working properly and the pump is not frozen." "Yes, sir," Quinn said. Mr. Hendricks replaced his hat and nodded to Sarah. "Welcome to the Double H, Miss Olivia. I hope you will be happy here." After he left, Sarah sank into one of the chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "I have a job," she said wonderingly. "I actually have a job." Quinn grinned at her, and she noticed for the first time that he had a dimple in his left cheek when he smiled fully. "You have a job. Now let me check this stove before Maria gets here. She is a force of nature, and you will want to be prepared." He was not exaggerating. Maria arrived 20 minutes later like a whirlwind, a small, round Mexican woman in her 50s with iron gray hair pinned in a tight bun and sharp black eyes that missed nothing. She carried a basket laden with food and was followed by a boy whom Sarah assumed was Daniel Hendricks. The boy was all gangly limbs and serious eyes, carrying an armful of clean linens. "So you are Margaret's niece," Maria said, setting her basket on the table and immediately beginning to unpack it. There was bread, cheese, cold chicken, apples, and a jar of milk. "You look like you have been dragged behind a horse. When did you last eat?" "This morning, I think," Sarah said, trying to remember. The day had become a blur. "This morning." Maria threw up her hands dramatically. "No wonder you are pale as a ghost. Sit, sit. Eat something before you faint." "Quinn, take those linens from Daniel and go make the bed. I will stay here and make sure this girl does not collapse." Quinn obeyed without question, which told Sarah a lot about Maria's position in the ranch hierarchy. Daniel followed Quinn into the bedroom, and Sarah could hear them discussing the best way to get the sheets smooth. She found herself eating the food Maria had brought, surprised by how ravenous she suddenly felt now that sustenance was in front of her. Maria sat across from her, watching with satisfaction. "That is better. You need to keep your strength up, especially in your condition. Margaret told me you were coming before she died. She was very worried about you." Sarah swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. "I wish I could have met her. She was a good woman, tough and fair. She would have helped you through this hard time. Now you have us instead. It is not the same, but we will do our best." Maria's voice was gruff, but her eyes were kind. "You should know that everyone here knows about the baby." Quinn asked Mr. Hendricks to tell the men so there would be no gossip or surprises. "The boss made it very clear that you are to be treated with respect, and that anyone who causes problems will be looking for work elsewhere. Most of the boys are good men who will not bother you. There are one or two who might need reminding of their manners, but Quinn will handle that." "Quinn seems to be handling a great many things on my behalf," Sarah said quietly. "I barely know him, and yet he has shown me more kindness than people I have known my entire life." Maria studied her shrewdly. "Quinn is a good man with a good heart. He does not do things by halves. If he has decided to help you, he will see it through. But do not mistake his kindness for pity. He respects strength, and he would not be helping you if he did not think you had the spine to make it out here." Before Sarah could respond, Quinn emerged from the bedroom with Daniel at his heels. "All made up and ready for you," he announced. "The sheets are clean and the room should be comfortable. Daniel and I also swept out the dust while we were in there." "Thank you," Sarah said, overwhelmed by the casual generosity these people were showing her. "All of you. I do not know how to repay such kindness." "You will repay it by making good food and not quitting on us," Maria said briskly, standing up. "Now it is getting late and you need rest. Tomorrow we'll come early. Daniel, say good night to Miss Olivia." "Good night, Miss Olivia," Daniel said shyly. "I am glad you are here. Your aunt used to make the best apple pie in the territory. Maybe you can learn her recipe." "I will certainly try," Sarah promised, touched by the boy's earnestness. After Maria and Daniel left, Quinn lingered for a moment. "I will come by tomorrow morning at 5 to show you where everything is in the kitchen and introduce you to the men at breakfast. Try to get some rest tonight. I know today has been overwhelming." "Quinn," Sarah said, standing up to face him, "why are you doing all this? And please do not just say it is because of your mother or because you are a good person. There must be more to it than that." He looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes serious. "Honestly, I do not fully know. When your aunt talked about you, I could hear the fear in her voice, fear that you would end up hurt or worse because the world had decided you were not worth protecting anymore. It made me angry, the injustice of it. And then when I saw you on that platform today, looking so scared but standing so straight, refusing to let the world see you break. I do not know, Sarah. I just knew I had to help if I could. Maybe that does not make sense." "It makes more sense than you know," Sarah said softly. "Thank you, Quinn, for everything." He nodded and settled his hat on his head. "Lock the door after I leave. I will see you in the morning." Sarah did as he instructed, turning the key in the lock and listening to his footsteps fade away across the yard. Then she stood alone in her aunt's cabin, her cabin now, and let herself cry again. But this time, the tears were not entirely from grief and fear. There was something else mixed in there too, something that felt almost like gratitude. She washed her face using water from the pump outside, then changed into her nightgown and climbed into the freshly made bed. The mattress was more comfortable than she had expected, and the sheets smelled of sunshine and soap. Through the open window, she could hear the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, horses nickering in the corrals, men's voices from the bunkhouse, the distant yip of a coyote somewhere out in the desert. It was all so strange and new, but Sarah found it oddly comforting. Here, in this wild place so far from everything she had known, perhaps she could finally find peace. Sleep claimed her almost immediately, and for the first time in months, her dreams were not nightmares. The knock on her door came at exactly 5 o'clock the next morning, and Sarah jerked awake in confusion before remembering where she was. "Just a moment," she called, scrambling out of bed and pulling on her wrapper. She had laid out her clothes the night before, but in her exhausted state had fallen asleep without setting them aside properly. "Take your time," Quinn's voice came through the door. "I will wait on the porch." Sarah dressed as quickly as she could, twisting her dark hair into a simple bun and splashing water on her face to wake herself fully. When she opened the door, Quinn was sitting on the porch step, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. He stood when he heard her and smiled that gentle smile that seemed to be his default expression. "Ready for your first day?" he asked. "Ready as I will ever be," Sarah replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Lead the way." The kitchen was housed in a separate building attached to the main house, which made sense given the heat of cooking in the Arizona climate. It was larger than Sarah had expected, with 2 massive stoves, long work tables, and shelves stocked with staples. Quinn showed her where everything was kept: flour, salt, lard, dried beans, coffee, sugar, and explained the system her aunt had used for keeping track of supplies and planning meals. "The men expect eggs, bacon or salt pork, and bread or biscuits for breakfast," Quinn explained. "Your aunt usually made a big batch of biscuits every other day. Coffee is essential, make it strong. For lunch, it is usually stew or beans with cornbread, and supper is similar but with fresh beef when we have it. There is a smokehouse out back with preserved meat, and a cold cellar under the kitchen for storing vegetables and dairy. Mr. Hendricks has an arrangement with several farmers in the area who deliver fresh supplies twice a week." Sarah's head was spinning with information, but she forced herself to focus. How many eggs will I need this morning? Figure 3 eggs per man if we have enough. There are 18 of us total counting you, but you might want to make a few extra. Cowboys and eggs are a love story. Sarah found herself actually laughing at that, and Quinn grinned at her response. They worked together to get breakfast started, Quinn showing her how to manage both stoves simultaneously to keep everything cooking at the right pace. Sarah cracked what seemed like hundreds of eggs into enormous skillets while Quinn sliced thick slabs of bacon. The coffee pot was big enough to bath a small child, and Sarah wondered if she would even be able to lift it once it was full. The men will start arriving at 5:30, Quinn said, checking his pocket watch. They will come in groups, get their food from the serving table over there, and sit at those long tables to eat. Your aunt usually stood behind the serving table to make sure there was always hot food available. The men are expected to clear their own plates and stack them in the washing tubs. After they leave, I usually help with the cleanup before heading out to work. You do not have to do that, Sarah protested. I can manage. I know you can, Quinn said easily. But I am going to help anyway, at least for the first few days until you get into a rhythm. Your aunt had 8 months to build up to her system. You are starting from scratch. The first cowboys started arriving at exactly 5:30, and Sarah's nervousness ratcheted up several notches. They came in talking and laughing, but fell silent when they saw her standing behind the serving table. Sarah lifted her chin and met their curious gazes directly, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "I am Sarah Olivia, and I will be cooking for you from now on. I hope the food is to your liking." There was a moment of awkward silence, and then a weathered older man with a gray mustache stepped forward and removed his hat. "Morning, Miss Olivia. Name is Walt Johnson. We are all real glad to have a proper cook again. I am sure whatever you make will be better than the swill we have been choking down." His words broke the ice, and the other men began introducing themselves as they filed past for their food. There was Red, a young cowboy with shocking red hair and a sunburned nose. Pete and Paul, twin brothers who looked so alike Sarah knew she would never tell them apart. Miguel, an older Mexican man with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. Jake, Ben, Charlie, Tom. The names blurred together, but Sarah smiled at each one and tried to memorize faces. The last man through the line was younger than most of the others, perhaps 20 or 21, with slicked-back blonde hair and pale blue eyes that looked Sarah up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "Well, well," he said, his voice oily with false charm. Quinn failed to mention how pretty our new cook was. "Name is Dalton Webb, Miss Olivia. If you need anything at all, you just let me know." "Thank you, Mr. Webb, but I am sure I will manage fine," Sarah said coolly, moving to refill the egg platter and putting distance between them. Quinn appeared at her elbow so quickly and quietly that Dalton actually took a step back. "Dalton, your food is getting cold. Better sit down and eat." "Sure thing, boss," Dalton said, but his eyes lingered on Sarah for another moment before he sauntered off to join the other men. "Is he going to be a problem?" Sarah asked quietly. "Not if he knows what is good for him," Quinn said, his jaw tight, "but I will keep an eye on him." The meal itself went smoothly. The men ate with the single-minded focus of people who did hard physical labor, and Sarah noticed that many of them went back for seconds. By the time the last cowboy filed out, the platters were scraped clean and the coffee pot was empty. Sarah sagged against the work table, exhausted, and it was not even 7 in the morning. "You did great," Quinn said, already filling the washing tubs with hot water from the reservoir built into one of the stoves. That was probably the hardest part, getting through the first meal. It will get easier as you settle into the routine. They washed dishes side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. Quinn washed while Sarah dried and put things away, and they talked about inconsequential things: the weather, the upcoming roundup, Daniel's progress with his schooling. It was comfortable and domestic, and Sarah found herself relaxing in Quinn's presence in a way she had not relaxed around a man since her world had fallen apart. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they finished the last of the dishes. "Of course. Why are you not married?" "You are kind, hardworking, clearly respected. I would think women would be lining up." Quinn smiled slightly, but there was sadness in it. "Not much time for courting when you are working from dawn to dusk. And to be honest, most of the women I have met are looking for something I cannot give them: security, maybe, or social standing. I am just a foreman at someone else's ranch, and I am likely to stay that way. That does not appeal to most women seeking a husband." "Then they are fools," Sarah said before she could stop herself. She felt her face heat with embarrassment. "I am sorry. That was too forward." "No, it was kind," Quinn said, his eyes warm. "Thank you, Sarah. Now you should take a few hours to rest before you have to start preparing lunch. I will come back at 11 to help you get things ready." "Quinn, you have your own work to do. You cannot spend all your time helping me." "The thing is," Quinn said, settling his hat on his head, "helping you is part of my work right now. Mr. Hendricks specifically told me to make sure you settle in well. So you are stuck with me for at least the first week, and then we will see how things are going." He left before Sarah could argue further, and she found herself alone in the big kitchen with hours to fill before she needed to start cooking again. She spent the time exploring further, taking detailed inventory of supplies and reading through her aunt's recipe notes. The more she read, the more impressed she became with Margaret Hutchins' organizational skills. Everything was planned out logically, with notations about which men preferred which dishes and warnings about ingredients that did not keep well in the heat. The days began to blur together in a rhythm of work and sleep. Sarah rose before dawn, prepared breakfast with Quinn's help, cleaned up, rested, prepared lunch, cleaned up, rested, prepared supper, cleaned up, and fell into bed exhausted. Quinn was true to his word, appearing at every meal to help her manage the workload. They developed an easy partnership, anticipating each other's movements and needs without having to speak. Sarah found herself looking forward to those hours in the kitchen with him, the quiet companionship that asked nothing of her except her presence. The other men treated her with cautious respect. Most of them thanked her for the meals and kept their distance otherwise, which was exactly what Sarah wanted. Dalton Webb continued to make her uncomfortable with his lingering looks and occasional too familiar comments, but Quinn's presence seemed to keep him in check. Maria visited every few days, always bringing some small gift: fresh eggs from her chickens, vegetables from the garden she maintained behind the main house, a jar of preserves. Daniel appeared regularly as well, often sitting at the kitchen table doing his schoolwork while Sarah cooked, keeping her company with his quiet presence and occasional questions about Pennsylvania. 2 weeks after Sarah arrived at the Double H, Maria cornered her in the kitchen after breakfast. "You are showing more," she said bluntly, eyeing Sarah's midsection. "Your dresses will not hide it much longer." Sarah looked down at herself. Maria was right, the slight thickening of her waist was becoming more pronounced, and her dresses were growing tight around the middle. "I do not have anything looser," she admitted. "I only brought one bag with me, and I did not think to pack maternity clothes." "You would not have had maternity clothes anyway," Maria said practically. "You were not showing when you left Philadelphia. Yes, come with me. I have some fabric, and we will make you proper dresses that will grow with you. You cannot cook in clothes that bind." Sarah found herself following Maria to the main house, where the older woman produced several lengths of calico and gingham fabric from a large trunk. "I sew for the household," Maria explained. "Mr. Hendricks pays me extra for it. We will make you 3 dresses, one to wear, one to wash, one for backup. Simple designs that lace in front so they can expand as you need them to." They spent the afternoon cutting and pinning fabric, with Maria giving instructions and Sarah following them as best she could. She had learned basic sewing as a girl, but Maria's skill was far superior. As they worked, Maria talked about her own life, how she had come to Arizona from Mexico as a young bride, how her husband had died in a mining accident 20 years ago, how she had found work at the Double H and made it her home. "You will make a home here too," Maria said confidently. "I can see it in you. You have the strength for this life." "I am not sure I have the strength for anything anymore," Sarah admitted. "Most days I feel like I am barely holding myself together." "That is because you are healing," Maria said wisely. "Healing always feels weak before it feels strong. You were broken and now you are knitting yourself back together. It takes time. But you are doing it whether you realize it or not. You get up every day and do the work. You do not complain. You are kind to people even when you are tired. These things take strength." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not feel strong. I feel foolish and ashamed." "For what?" "For believing someone who lied to you. For trusting someone who proved unworthy of that trust," Maria snorted. "That is not shame you should carry. That is shame he should carry, the man who abandoned you. You did nothing wrong except be young and believe in love. There is no crime in that." "My family thought there was," Sarah said bitterly. "They could not get rid of me fast enough." "Then your family is made of cowards," Maria said bluntly. "Family is supposed to stand together in hard times. They failed you, not the other way around. But you have a new family now, all of us here at the ranch. We do not run when things get difficult." Over the next few days, Sarah found herself noticing things she had been too overwhelmed to see before. The way Walt Johnson always complimented her cooking and carefully scraped his plate clean before returning it. The way Red brought her wildflowers once, shyly presenting them, and then running off before she could thank him properly. The way Pete and Paul argued good-naturedly over who got the last biscuit and then split it in half rather than taking it from the other. These men, rough and work-worn as they were, had welcomed her into their world and treated her with a gentleness she had not expected. And Quinn. Always Quinn, appearing exactly when she needed help, anticipating problems before they arose, quietly taking care of 100 small things that made her work easier. He fixed the squeaky hinge on the kitchen door. He adjusted the damper on one of the stoves so it heated more evenly. He brought her a footstool so she could reach the high shelves more easily. He never made a fuss about these small kindnesses, just did them and moved on as though it were the most natural thing in the world. 3 weeks after Sarah's arrival, Roundup began in earnest. The pace of work intensified dramatically. Breakfast moved to 5 o'clock. Lunch became an elaborate production that had to be loaded into a wagon and driven out to wherever the men were working on the range. And supper grew into a massive meal designed to fuel exhausted men who had been in the saddle for 12 or 14 hours. Sarah found herself working from 4 in the morning until 9 at night, and falling into bed so tired she sometimes forgot to undress properly. Quinn was with her through all of it, somehow managing to do his own work while still appearing at crucial moments to help her load supplies into the wagon or lift heavy pots, or wrangle the massive cuts of beef that needed to be roasted. He drove the wagon out to the range at midday, and Sarah rode beside him, bouncing over the rough terrain and trying not to think about how the jostling affected the baby. But the child seemed content enough, and Sarah found herself occasionally placing a hand on her belly to feel the tiny flutters that had started a few days earlier. "Are you feeling all right?" Quinn asked one day as they drove back from delivering lunch. "You look pale." "Just tired," Sarah admitted. "I am not used to this pace of work. None of us are, really. Roundup is always brutal, but it will be over in another 3 weeks, and then things will slow down considerably." He glanced at her, concern evident in his expression. "You should rest this afternoon instead of starting supper preparations. I will talk to Mr. Hendricks about hiring a temporary helper from town." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I can manage. I am not an invalid, just pregnant. Women have been working through pregnancies since the beginning of time." "Stubborn," Quinn said, but there was affection in his voice. "You are incredibly stubborn, you know that." "I have to be," Sarah said quietly. "If I let myself be weak, even for a moment, I am afraid I will not be able to get back up again." Quinn reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm and solid against hers. "You would get back up. I would make sure of it. But you do not have to do this alone, Sarah. That is what I have been trying to tell you. Let people help." Sarah looked at their joined hands, surprised by how right it felt. She had been so focused on maintaining her independence and proving her worth that she had not allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing steadily over the past 3 weeks. Quinn had become more than just a helpful colleague. He had become someone she looked forward to seeing, someone whose smile could brighten her entire day, someone she trusted in a way she had not trusted anyone in a very long time. "I am afraid," she whispered. "What if I start to rely on people and they leave? What if I let myself care and it all falls apart again?" "That is always a risk," Quinn said gently. "But the alternative is to go through life never letting anyone close, and that is not really living at all. I know you have been hurt badly, Sarah. I know you have every reason to protect yourself, but not everyone is like the man who betrayed you. Some people stay." "Do you?" Sarah asked, looking up at him. "Do you stay?" "Always," Quinn said, his gray eyes intense. "I am not going anywhere." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then the wagon hit a particularly deep rut, and they both jerked apart, the spell broken. Quinn cleared his throat and focused on driving, but he did not let go of Sarah's hand, and she did not pull away. That evening after supper, as Sarah was finishing the cleanup, Dalton Webb appeared in the kitchen doorway. The other men had long since returned to the bunkhouse, and Sarah was alone for the first time all day. She looked up and felt a chill run down her spine at the expression on Dalton's face. "Can I help you with something, Mr. Webb?" she asked, keeping her voice steady and positioning herself so the work table was between them. "Just thought I would check on you," Dalton said, stepping into the kitchen and closing the door behind him. "You have been working awful hard lately. Must be tough, doing all this in your condition." "I am managing fine, thank you. Now if you will excuse me, I need to finish here and get some rest." "No need to be so cold," Dalton said, moving closer. "I am just trying to be friendly. You must get lonely out here, a woman on her own with no man to take care of you. I could help with that loneliness if you wanted. No strings attached, just 2 people enjoying each other's company." Sarah's stomach churned with revulsion. "Get out, now. Come on, sweetheart. You are already in trouble, what is a little more? No one would blame you. Might as well enjoy yourself." "I said get out." Sarah grabbed the nearest heavy object, a cast iron skillet, and raised it threateningly. "Leave now, or I will scream loud enough to bring every man on this ranch running." Dalton held up his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes were cold. "No need for dramatics. I was just making conversation, but you might want to think about being nicer to me. Accidents happen around ranches. Would be a shame if you got hurt and had to leave." He left, and Sarah sank into a chair, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She sat there for several minutes, trying to calm herself, before finally gathering her courage and heading toward the main house. She needed to tell Mr. Hendricks what had happened before Dalton could spread lies about the encounter. She found Quinn instead, walking back from the barn. He took one look at her face and was at her side immediately. "What happened?" Sarah told him everything, watching his expression grow progressively darker. By the time she finished, his jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Stay here," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I am going to handle this." "Quinn, do not do anything that will get you in trouble." "I will not," he promised. "But Dalton needs to understand that his behavior is not acceptable, and he needs to understand it tonight." Quinn strode toward the bunkhouse with Sarah hurrying after him, not wanting to miss what happened but also afraid of what Quinn might do. He pushed open the bunkhouse door and scanned the room until he found Dalton sitting on his bunk cleaning his rifle. "Dalton, outside." "Now," Quinn said. "What is this about?" Dalton said, not moving. "Outside," Quinn repeated. "Unless you want me to say this in front of everyone." Dalton set down his rifle and stood up slowly, following Quinn outside. Sarah stood in the shadows near the door, watching as the two men faced off in the yard. "You threatened Miss Olivia tonight," Quinn said, his voice carrying in the still evening air. "You made inappropriate advances, and when she refused you, you threatened her safety. Is that accurate?" "I do not know what she told you, but she is lying," Dalton said. "I was just trying to be nice to her. She is the one who got all hysterical about it. So you did go to the kitchen and speak to her when she was alone." "Sure, and you made comments about her personal situation." "I was just making conversation." "And when she told you to leave, you threatened that accidents happen around ranches." Dalton shifted uncomfortably. "You are twisting my words." "No, I am repeating what she told me, and I believe her. You have had chances before comments to Maria, that incident with the girl in town last year. Mr. Hendricks gave you another opportunity because you are a good hand with cattle, but you have used up all your chances, Dalton. You are done here." "You cannot fire me," Dalton said angrily. "You are not the owner." "No, but I am the foreman, and I have full authority to dismiss hands for cause. You can pick up your wages from Mr. Hendricks in the morning. I want you packed and off this ranch by sunrise." "This is because of her." Dalton gestured toward where Sarah stood in the shadows. "You are firing me because of some lying woman who spread her legs for some rich man and is now playing the victim." Quinn moved so fast that Sarah barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next his fist connected with Dalton's jaw with a crack that made Sarah wince. Dalton went down hard, blood streaming from his split lip. "You will not speak about her that way," Quinn said, standing over Dalton with his fist still clenched. "You will not speak about any woman that way. Get up, pack your things, and be gone by dawn. If I see you on this ranch after sunrise, or if I hear you have been spreading lies about Miss Olivia, you will answer to me again. And next time, I will not stop with one punch. Do we understand each other?" Dalton got to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. "You will regret this." "The only regret I have is not doing it sooner. Now get out of my sight." Dalton slunk back toward the bunkhouse, and Quinn stood watching until he disappeared inside. Then he turned and saw Sarah standing in the shadows. His expression softened immediately, and he walked over to her. "I am sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "I do not like violence, but some men do not understand anything else." "You defended me," Sarah said wonderingly. "You believed me without question, and you defended me." "Of course I believed you. I know what kind of man Dalton is, and I know what kind of person you are. There was never any doubt in my mind. Quinn flexed his hand, wincing slightly. I think I might have broken something hitting his thick skull. Let me see, Sarah said, taking his hand carefully. His knuckles were already swelling and would probably bruise spectacularly by morning. Come to my cabin. I have some salve that will help with the swelling. They walked together through the darkness, and Sarah was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the controlled power in his movements, the gentleness with which he had taken her hand earlier. Inside her cabin, she lit the lamps and found the jar of arnica salve that Maria had given her for various aches and pains. Sit, she instructed, and Quinn obeyed, settling into one of the chairs. Sarah sat across from him and took his injured hand in both of hers, carefully spreading the salve over his swollen knuckles. He watched her face as she worked, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze even though she kept her eyes on her task. "Sarah," he said quietly. "Yes." "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I have been trying not to say this because I know the timing is all wrong and you have so much to deal with already. But after tonight, after almost losing the chance to say it, I think I need to be honest." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I am falling in love with you. I might have been falling since the moment I saw you on that train platform, looking so scared and brave all at once. I know I have no right to feel this way. I know you are dealing with another man's child and the aftermath of being betrayed. I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear. But I needed you to know that my help, my protection, everything I have done, it is not out of pity or obligation. It is because I care about you deeply, and I want to be there for you in whatever way you will allow." Sarah's hand stilled on his. She looked up and met his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and warmth in their gray depths. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must surely be able to hear it. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "You do not have to say anything," Quinn assured her quickly. "I am not asking for anything. I just needed you to know how I feel. You can ignore it or tell me to stop or whatever you need to do. It would not change anything about how I treat you or the help I give you. That comes with no strings attached." "Quinn." Sarah set down the salve jar and took both his hands in hers, mindful of his injured knuckles. "I would be lying if I said I had not thought about you, about us. These past weeks, working beside you, talking with you, seeing how kind and good you are, it has been healing something in me that I thought was broken beyond repair. But I am terrified. I gave my heart away once and it was crushed. The father of this child made me believe he loved me, and then he disappeared the moment things became difficult. How do I know you are different? How do I know you will not wake up one day and realize that taking on another man's child is too much burden, too much complication?" "Because I am not him," Quinn said simply. "I know that is not enough to erase your fear. I know I will have to prove it to you over time. But Sarah, I know what I want. I grew up watching my mother struggle alone because the man who got her pregnant refused to take responsibility. I know exactly what I would be taking on, and I want it anyway. I want you, and I want the child you are carrying, and I want to build a life together if you will give me that chance." "It is too soon," Sarah said, but she did not let go of his hands. "I am not ready to trust again. Not yet." "Then I will wait," Quinn said. "I will wait as long as it takes, and in the meantime I will keep showing up, keep being here, keep proving that I mean what I say. No pressure, no expectations, just me being constant." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Why are you so good?" "I am not," Quinn said, reaching up to brush away her tears with his thumb. "I am just a man who knows what he wants and is not afraid to work for it. And what I want is you, Sarah, Olivia. Every stubborn, strong, beautiful part of you." They sat like that for a long moment, hands intertwined, something fragile and precious forming between them. Then Sarah stood, and Quinn stood with her, clearly preparing to leave and give her space. But Sarah did not want space. For the first time in months, she wanted to be close to someone to feel safe and cared for. "Stay," she said impulsively. "Not like that," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "Just stay and talk with me for a while. Tell me about your life, your mother, how you ended up in Arizona. I want to know you better." Quinn's smile was sunrise breaking over the desert. "I would like that." They sat up talking until nearly midnight, the conversation flowing easily between them. Quinn told her about growing up on various ranches, following his mother from job to job, learning to ride and rope before he could barely walk. He talked about his mother with deep affection, describing a woman who had survived terrible circumstances with grace and dignity. He explained how he had worked his way up from stable boy to ranch hand to foreman, earning Mr. Hendrick's trust through years of hard work and loyalty. Sarah found herself reciprocating, telling him about her childhood in Philadelphia's comfortable middle-class society, about her love of books and learning, about the scandal when her father's business failed, and they had to move to a smaller house in a less fashionable neighborhood. She even found the courage to talk about Thomas, the banker's son who had courted her with poetry and promises, who had made her feel special and chosen, and who had vanished the moment his charming lies became inconvenient truth. "He told me he loved me," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "He said we would be married as soon as he secured his inheritance. He made me believe that what we were doing was not wrong because we were already committed to each other in our hearts. I gave him everything, my trust, my innocence, my whole heart, and it meant nothing to him. I was nothing to him except a temporary amusement." "You deserved better," Quinn said fiercely. "You deserved someone who would cherish you and stand by you. I am sorry he was not that person, but his failure says nothing about your worth, Sarah. You are remarkable." Sarah wanted desperately to believe him. Looking into his earnest face, seeing the conviction in his eyes, she found herself taking the first tentative steps toward trust again. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for everything you have done." "It is my privilege," Quinn said simply. When he finally left, well past midnight, Sarah lay in her bed feeling more at peace than she had in months. Yes, she was still pregnant and alone. Yes, she was working herself to exhaustion on a ranch in the middle of the Arizona desert. Yes, her future was uncertain and frightening. But she also had a home, meaningful work, people who cared about her, and perhaps most important, Quinn Oliver, with his steady presence and gentle kindness, and his extraordinary declaration of love. The baby fluttered in her womb, a tiny reminder of the new life growing inside her. Sarah placed her hand on her belly and whispered to the child, "We are going to be all right, little one. We are going to make it through this." For the first time, she actually believed it. The next morning, Dalton Webb was gone, and Sarah noticed that the men treated her with even more respect than before. Word had clearly spread about what had happened, and about Quinn's decisive response. Walt Johnson actually paused before leaving after breakfast to say, "You are under our protection now, Miss Olivia. Any man who bothers you will answer to all of us, not just Quinn." Sarah was deeply moved by this simple statement of solidarity. These rough cowboys, most of whom probably had little formal education and even less exposure to polite society, understood loyalty and protection in a way her educated Philadelphia family never had. The roundup continued for another 3 weeks, and Sarah fell into the demanding rhythm of the work. Her body was changing rapidly now, her belly swelling noticeably, her breasts becoming fuller, her ankles occasionally swelling from the long hours on her feet. But she also felt stronger somehow, her muscles adapting to the physical demands, her confidence growing with each successful meal served. Quinn was a constant presence, though he was careful not to crowd her or push for more than she was ready to give. They worked together in comfortable companionship, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Sarah felt her walls coming down. She began to trust that he would be there when he said he would. She began to believe that his kindness was genuine rather than a trap or a manipulation. She began to imagine a future that included him. One evening after supper, Quinn found her standing outside her cabin watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. He stood beside her in companionable silence for a moment before speaking. "The baby is moving now, is it not? I have seen you touch your belly sometimes like you are feeling something." Sarah nodded. "Yes, it feels like butterflies or tiny bubbles at first, but now it is getting stronger. Sometimes I can actually see the movement from outside." "That must be amazing," Quinn said quietly, "and probably terrifying." "Both," Sarah admitted. "I am afraid of so many things, afraid of the birth, afraid of caring for a baby on my own, afraid of what will happen when I cannot work for a while. Maria says women have been doing this forever, but that does not make it less scary." "You will not be on your own," Quinn reminded her. "You have Maria and Mr. Hendricks and all of us. We will figure it out together." "Why do you want this?" Sarah asked, turning to face him. "You could have any woman in the territory, someone without complications or baggage. Why choose me and all the difficulties I bring?" Quinn considered the question seriously. "I think because you see me for who I really am. Most women look at me and see a foreman at someone else's ranch, or they see the circumstances of my birth and judge me for it. But you look at me and see Quinn just a man trying to do right by people. And when I look at you, I see someone brave and resilient who has been through terrible things and kept going anyway. I see someone who cares about doing good work and treating people with kindness even when she is exhausted. I see someone worth loving." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "I am starting to care for you," she confessed. "More than I thought I could care for anyone again. It terrifies me, but it also feels right in a way nothing has felt right in a very long time." "Then let it feel right," Quinn said gently. "You do not have to be afraid with me, Sarah." "I promise you that." "Can you make me another promise?" Sarah asked. "Anything." "Promise that if you ever stop feeling this way, if you ever decide this is too much or that you made a mistake, you will tell me honestly. Do not just disappear like he did. Give me the respect of the truth, even if it hurts." "I can promise that," Quinn said, reaching out to take her hand. "Though I do not believe that day will ever come. I am in this for the long term, Sarah. I know my own heart and it is set on you." Standing there in the fading light with Quinn's hand warm in hers, Sarah made a decision. She had been hurt before, devastatingly so. But hiding from love for fear of more pain was not protecting her. It was just another way of letting Thomas win, of letting his betrayal define her future. Quinn had been showing her for weeks that he was trustworthy, that his kindness was genuine, that his feelings were real. It was time to take a leap of faith. "I care about you, Quinn," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am not saying I am ready for everything right now, but I am saying I want to try. I want to see where this goes between us." Quinn's face lit up with such joy that Sarah could not help but smile in response. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am sure," Sarah said. "Terrified but sure." "Then may I court you properly?" Quinn asked. "With your permission, I would like to take you driving on Sunday afternoons, bring you flowers, spend time getting to know each other better. I want to do this right." "I would like that," Sarah said softly. Quinn raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "You will not regret this," he promised. "I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of your trust." And he did exactly that. Despite the demanding work of finishing the roundup, and then the regular ranch duties that followed, Quinn made time for Sarah. On Sunday afternoons, he arrived at her cabin with the wagon freshly washed and his good shirt on, and they drove through the desert exploring the landscape. He showed her hidden springs where cottonwood trees grew thick and green, ancient rock formations carved into fantastic shapes by wind and water, vistas where you could see for 100 miles in every direction. They talked about everything and nothing, their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future. Quinn spoke of one day owning his own small spread, modest but sufficient to support a family. Sarah talked about wanting to give her child a good life, full of love and security and opportunities. They discussed books they had read, places they wanted to see, the small daily details that make up a life. With each conversation, Sarah felt herself falling deeper for this gentle, steady man who treated her like something precious. Quinn brought her flowers desert blooms in unlikely colors that he found during his workdays. He taught her to recognize the calls of different birds and the tracks of various animals. He introduced her to his favorite horse, a patient sorrel gelding named Copper who let Sarah feed him apples and stroke his velvety nose. He was attentive without being overbearing, affectionate without being presumptuous, constant without being suffocating. Mr. Hendricks noticed the developing relationship and pulled Sarah aside one day in early September. "Quinn is a good man," he said bluntly. "One of the best I have ever known. If you two are serious about each other, you have my blessing. And if you decide to marry, he can build a house here on the ranch for your family. He has earned that and more." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said, touched by his approval. "That means a great deal to both of us." As September progressed, Sarah's pregnancy became impossible to hide. Her belly was round and prominent now, the baby's movements visible from the outside. She had to stop wearing her apron strings tied in back and instead tied them on the side to accommodate her changing shape. The work was becoming more difficult. Standing for long periods made her back ache, and she tired more easily than before. But she refused to give up her position, instead accepting help when it was offered and adjusting her methods to conserve energy. Maria became increasingly involved in preparing for the baby's arrival. She produced a beautiful handmade cradle that had belonged to her own children, long since grown and moved away. She helped Sarah sew tiny gowns and blankets from soft cotton fabric. She talked frankly about what to expect during labor and birth, demystifying the process and making it feel less terrifying. "The pain is real," Maria said practically. "I will not lie to you about that, but women's bodies are made for this and you are strong. I will be with you and Quinn will be nearby. You will get through it and then you will have your baby." "I am afraid," Sarah admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I am not a good mother? What if I look at this baby and only see Thomas and all the pain he caused?" "You will not," Maria said confidently. "That baby is half you and you are a good person with a good heart. You will love your child fiercely and you will be an excellent mother. As for things going wrong, yes, childbirth has risks. But we will have the doctor come from town, and I have helped deliver more babies than I can count. We will take good care of you and your little one." One evening in late September, Sarah was sitting on her porch watching the stars appear when Quinn arrived with a bundle under his arm. He looked nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I made something for you," he said, setting the bundle down carefully. "I have been working on it in the evenings for the past month. I hope you like it." Sarah unwrapped the bundle to find an exquisite rocking chair made of smooth golden wood. The craftsmanship was beautiful, every joint tight, every surface sanded to satin smoothness, the rockers perfectly balanced. Carved into the back of the chair was a simple but elegant pattern of flowers and vines. "Quinn," "This is beautiful," Sarah breathed, running her hands over the wood. "You made this." "My mother taught me woodworking when I was young. She said every man should know how to make useful things with his hands. I thought you might want a comfortable chair for rocking the baby, and for yourself, for resting." Sarah sat in the chair and began to rock gently. It moved smoothly, the motion soothing and peaceful. She could imagine herself sitting here in the evenings, holding her newborn, singing lullabies under the stars. "It is perfect. Thank you." Quinn knelt beside the chair so he was at eye level with her. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know there is no pressure to answer one way or the other. I will understand whatever you decide." Sarah's heart began to pound. "What is it?" "Marry me," Quinn said simply. "I know the timing is complicated. I know you are about to have another man's baby. I know we have only known each other a few months. But I love you, Sarah. I want to spend my life with you. I want to be a father to your child and to any other children we might have together. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a home with you, a real home full of love and laughter and all the things we both deserved but never got. I am not asking because I think you need rescuing or because I feel obligated. I am asking because I cannot imagine my future without you in it." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Are you sure? Once we are married, you cannot change your mind. You will be legally tied to me and to this child. People will think the baby is yours, and they will judge you for that." "Let them judge," Quinn said. "I do not care what people think. I care about you. And this baby will be mine in every way that matters. I will be there for the birth. I will teach them to ride and read. I will protect them and provide for them and love them as my own. They will have my name and my heart, and that is what makes a real father, not just blood." "Yes," Sarah said through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Quinn let out a whoop of joy and gathered her into his arms, mindful of her belly but holding her as close as he could. He kissed her then, gently but thoroughly, and Sarah felt all the broken pieces inside her begin to knit together at last. This was not the passionate, reckless love she had felt for Thomas. This was something deeper and truer, built on friendship and respect and genuine care. This was the kind of love that lasted. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who passed through Oatman once a month. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Maria had made for her, with a crown of desert flowers in her hair. Quinn wore his good suit, his face shining with happiness. Mr. Hendricks, Maria, Daniel, and all the ranch hands attended, crowding into the small church in town and cheering loudly when the preacher pronounced them man and wife. That night, Quinn moved his belongings into Sarah's cabin, their cabin now. He was gentle and patient with her, understanding that her pregnancy and past trauma meant they needed to take physical intimacy slowly. They lay together in the bed talking late into the night, Sarah tucked against Quinn's side, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "I felt the baby kick," Quinn said wonderingly when the child moved against his palm. "That is incredible." "The baby likes you already," Sarah said, feeling peaceful and content in a way she had not felt in over a year. "You are going to be such a good father." "I am going to try my hardest," Quinn promised. "This child will never doubt that they are wanted and loved. Neither will you. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you both know how precious you are to me." 2 weeks later, Sarah woke in the early hours of the morning with a gripping pain across her belly. At first, she thought it was just the usual discomforts of late pregnancy, but then another pain came, stronger and more insistent. She touched Quinn's shoulder, and he woke instantly. "It is time," she said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "The baby is coming." Quinn was out of bed immediately, pulling on his clothes and boots. "I will get Maria and send someone for the doctor. You stay here and breathe like Maria taught you. I will be right back." He ran out into the pre-dawn darkness, and Sarah heard him shouting for Maria. Within minutes, Maria bustled into the cabin with her bag of supplies, taking charge with calm efficiency. She examined Sarah, timed the pains, and declared that the baby would probably arrive by midday. The doctor arrived from town 2 hours later, a kindly older man named Dr. Patterson, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Between him and Maria, Sarah felt she was in good hands. But as the hours wore on and the pains grew stronger and closer together, she found herself gripping Quinn's hand and crying out with each contraction. "You are doing wonderfully," Maria encouraged her. "The baby will be here soon." "I cannot do this," Sarah gasped between pains. "It hurts too much." "Yes, you can," Quinn said firmly, wiping her face with a cool cloth. "You are the strongest person I know, Sarah. You can do this. Just a little longer." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was actually about 8 hours of labor, the doctor announced that it was time to push. Sarah bore down with all her strength, Quinn supporting her and Maria coaching her, until finally, mercifully, she felt the baby slip free with a rush of relief. A thin, wavering cry filled the cabin, and Sarah collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant. The doctor was doing something with the baby, and Sarah could not see clearly through her tears. "You have a son," the doctor announced, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket and placing him in Sarah's arms. "A healthy boy, 8 pounds if I am guessing right. Congratulations." Sarah looked down at the tiny, red-faced baby in her arms and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce and immediate that it took her breath away. He was perfect, 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes, a shock of dark hair, unfocused blue eyes trying to make sense of this bright new world. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama. And this is your papa," she added, looking up at Quinn. Quinn was crying unashamedly, staring at the baby with awe and wonder. "He is perfect. Sarah, he is absolutely perfect. Can I hold him?" Sarah carefully transferred the baby to Quinn's arms, and watching her husband cradle their son was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Quinn looked down at the child with such love and tenderness that Sarah knew, without any doubt, that this baby would grow up secure and cherished. "What should we name him?" Quinn asked softly. Sarah had been thinking about this for weeks. "I would like to name him after your mother if possible." "What was her name?" "Rose," Quinn said, his voice thick with emotion. "Her name was Rose Marie Oliver." "Then how about Marcus Rose Oliver?" Sarah suggested. "We can call him Marcus after my grandfather, but his middle name honors your mother." "I love it," Quinn said. "Marcus Rose Oliver, welcome to the family, son." The weeks after Marcus's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Sarah had never been so tired in her life, but she also had never been happier. Quinn was an involved and loving father from the very beginning, walking the floor with Marcus when he fussed, changing his diapers without complaint, sitting up with Sarah during nighttime feedings just to keep her company. Maria was a constant source of help and advice, and even some of the cowboys stopped by to meet the new arrival and offer awkward congratulations. Mr. Hendricks had given Sarah 2 months of leave from cooking, hiring a temporary cook from town to cover her duties. Sarah was grateful for the time to recover and bond with her baby, though she found herself missing the rhythm and purpose of the kitchen work. When Marcus was 6 weeks old and settling into a more predictable routine, she began gradually returning to her duties, working reduced hours and bringing Marcus with her in a basket where she could keep an eye on him. The men were surprisingly good with the baby. Walt Johnson carved him a set of wooden blocks. Red knitted a tiny pair of booties in secret and left them on Sarah's porch, too shy to present them in person. Miguel sang Spanish lullabies when Marcus fussed, his deep voice soothing the baby instantly. Even Mr. Hendricks stopped by regularly to check on his newest resident, clearly charmed by the infant. As winter settled over the desert gentle, by Eastern standards, but still cold enough to require fires and extra blankets, Sarah reflected on how drastically her life had changed in less than a year. She had arrived in Oatman expecting judgment and condemnation, prepared to endure scorn and whispered insults. Instead, she had found kindness, acceptance, and love. She had found meaningful work that gave her purpose and pride. She had found a community that valued her for her abilities rather than condemning her for her mistakes. And most importantly, she had found Quinn, steady and true, who loved her not despite her past, but simply because of who she was. One evening as they sat together on the porch, Sarah in her rocking chair nursing Marcus, Quinn whittling a toy horse for the baby, Sarah felt compelled to speak the gratitude that filled her heart. "Thank you," she said quietly. Quinn looked up from his whittling. "For what?" "For meeting me at that train platform. For believing in me when I did not believe in myself. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For being Marcus's father in every way that matters. For building this life with me. For everything." Quinn set down his work and reached over to take her free hand. "You do not need to thank me for loving you, Sarah. That is the easiest thing I have ever done. You and Marcus are my whole world, and I am grateful every single day that you gave me a chance." "I think I am starting to understand something," Sarah said thoughtfully. "What happened with Thomas, it was not love, no matter what I thought at the time. It was infatuation and manipulation and lies dressed up as romance. What we have, this is real love. The kind that shows up every day and does the work, the kind that stays. This is forever," Quinn agreed. "You are stuck with me, Mrs. Oliver." "I cannot think of anywhere else I would rather be stuck," Sarah said, smiling at him over their son's downy head. The years passed with the gentle rhythm of ranch life. Marcus grew from a baby into a curious toddler, following his father around and trying to imitate everything Quinn did. When Marcus was 2, Sarah became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was celebrated without complications or shame. Their daughter, Grace Margaret Oliver, was born on a cool spring morning, named for Maria's middle name and Sarah's aunt. Grace was followed 2 years later by another son, James Quinn Oliver, called Jamie by everyone on the ranch. Quinn eventually purchased a piece of land adjacent to the Double H, a modest spread of 500 acres with a good water source and room for a small cattle herd. He built Sarah a proper house with his own hands, nothing fancy, but solid and comfortable, with a big kitchen and bedrooms for all their children, and a wide porch where they could sit and watch the sunset after long days of work. They ran their cattle alongside Mr. Hendricks' herd, and Quinn continued to serve as foreman of the Double H while building up his own operations slowly and carefully. Sarah divided her time between managing their own household and helping Maria with cooking at the ranch during busy seasons. As the children grew older, they helped with both operations, Marcus learning ranching skills from Quinn, Grace showing a surprising talent for cooking and household management, Jamie proving to be a natural with horses. Sarah taught all of them to read and write and do mathematics, providing the education she had valued so much in her own childhood. On Marcus's 10th birthday, Sarah was sitting on the porch watching her children play in the yard when Quinn came to sit beside her. He had gray in his hair now and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to Sarah, he was more handsome than ever. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Quinn asked, following her gaze to where Marcus was teaching Jamie to rope a fence post while Grace cheered them on. "Sometimes," Sarah admitted, "I think about that scared girl on the train platform, certain her life was over. I think about what might have happened if you had not been there to meet me, if you had not offered me kindness when I expected condemnation. I think about how close I came to giving up entirely." "But you did not give up," Quinn said. "You found the strength to keep going, to start over, to trust again. I may have offered help, but you did the hard work of rebuilding your life." "We did it together," Sarah corrected him. "Everything good in my life now I share with you." Marcus ran over to them, breathless and excited. "Papa, did you see? I roped the post 3 times in a row. I saw, son." "You are getting really good at that," Quinn said, ruffling the boy's dark hair. Marcus had inherited Sarah's coloring and features, but his mannerisms and personality were pure Quinn, steady, kind, thoughtful. "Do you think I am good enough to help with Roundup next spring?" Marcus asked hopefully. "I think you might be," Quinn said, and Marcus whooped with joy before running back to his siblings to share the news. Sarah watched her son go. This child who had once been a source of shame and fear, now a confident, happy boy who knew nothing but love and security. She thought about Thomas sometimes, wondered what had become of him, whether he ever thought about the child he had abandoned. But those thoughts no longer brought pain, only a distant sense of pity for a man who would never know what he had missed. "Sarah," Quinn said, pulling her from her reverie. "Yes, I love you. I know I say it all the time, but I want to make sure you never forget." "I love you too," Sarah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible. You gave me everything: a home, a family, a reason to believe in good things again. You gave me a life worth living." "We gave each other that," Quinn said. "We built this together, and we will keep building it together for as long as we both shall live." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Sarah felt complete peace. She had traveled so far from that terrified girl on the train, expecting judgment and finding only kindness. She had survived heartbreak and shame and fear, and had come through stronger on the other side. She had found love, real, lasting, transformative love with a cowboy who had greeted her with a gentle smile and an open heart. Years later, when Sarah was old and gray, surrounded by children and grandchildren, she would still remember that first moment on the train platform, the crushing fear, the desperate hope, and then Quinn's kind eyes and steady voice offering her salvation. She would tell her grandchildren that sometimes the worst moments of your life could lead to the best ones, if you were brave enough to keep going. She would tell them that family was not just about blood, but about the people who chose to love you and stand by you when times were hard. And every time she told the story, she would look over at Quinn, older now, moving a bit slower, but still strong and steady and true, and feel grateful for the simple miracle of a man who had offered kindness to a stranger and changed both their lives forever. Their love story had not been easy or simple, but it had been real, and it had lasted, and in the end, that was everything. On her 80th birthday, surrounded by 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren, Sarah sat in the rocking chair Quinn had made her so many years ago and looked out at the land they had built together. Quinn sat beside her in his own chair, his hand clasped in hers as it had been for over 50 years. "No regrets?" he asked softly, the question one he had posed regularly throughout their marriage. "Not a single one," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "You?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner," Quinn said, his eyes still twinkling with the same warmth and humor they had held when he was young. "But then, we found each other exactly when we were meant to. I believe that." "So do I," Sarah agreed. As the sun set once more over the desert that had become her home, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey of her life. She had arrived in Oatman broken and afraid, expecting nothing but judgment and scorn. Instead, she had found a place where she belonged, people who valued her, and a love that had sustained her through every challenge and blessed her with countless joys. The Wild West had given her exactly what she needed, not an easy life, but a meaningful one, filled with purpose and connection, and the deep satisfaction of building something lasting with her own two hands and the help of a good man who had believed in her from the very beginning. Her story, she realized, was not really about the mistakes she had made or the hardships she had endured. It was about second chances and the transformative power of genuine kindness. It was about finding the courage to trust again after betrayal, to love again after heartbreak, to hope again after despair. And it was about discovering that sometimes the worst thing that ever happened to you could lead directly to the best thing, if you were brave enough to see the journey through. Looking around at the faces of her children and their children, all of them bearing the legacy of the life she and Quinn had built together, Sarah felt profound gratitude. Marcus was a successful rancher himself now, running an operation twice the size of Quinn's. Grace had married a lawyer in Oatman and was active in territorial politics, pushing for better schools and women's suffrage. Jamie ran the original Oliver ranch, having taken it over when Quinn finally retired at 70. All of them were good, decent people who treated others with kindness and respect, passing on the values their parents had demonstrated every day of their lives. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked, watching her face. "Everything," Sarah said simply. "How far we have come. How blessed we have been. How much I still love you after all these years." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Quinn assured her. "You made my life worth living, Sarah Oliver. Every single day with you has been a gift." And there, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured, Sarah and Quinn sat together watching the stars appear in the vast Arizona sky, hands clasped, hearts joined, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Their story had started with a train, a platform, and a gentle smile, but it had become so much more a testament to the enduring power of love, kindness, and the simple courage to begin again.